than harm. Joining us is Phil Weiss, Senior Energy Analyst at Argus Research Company, and David Callahan, International Program Director and Senior Fellow at Demos.
They almost forgot they make cars go.
You know, they fuel the economy.
Right.
So, David Callahan, I'll go to you. I kind of like this ConocoPhillips guy. Isn't penalizing oil companies un-American?
Well, look, the whole reason you have tax breaks is to incentivize people to do things they wouldn't otherwise do. And there are plenty of incentives for these oil companies. This is a hugely profitable business. The top 5 oil companies have made $1 trillion in the last decade. They're probably going to make $1 trillion more in the next decade. They don't need these tax breaks. And $20 billion, which is what this legislation is, whacking $20 billion of those tax breaks is not going to, it's a pinprick to these companies. But try to get that $20 billion out of Head Start or Pell Grants, and it causes real pain. So I think that the Democrats are on to the right track there.
But Phil, if these tax breaks are repealed, won't the oil companies invest less in jobs, invest less in infrastructure, make us more dependent on foreign oil? Isn't there an argument here?
Yeah, yes, there certainly is, because if you take some of their money away, that does leave less, whether it's to pay dividends, whether it's to invest in new projects, whether it's to hire new people, because prices ultimately in a fair market are going to go up if we increase the cost of production, and that's what reducing the tax breaks does. It increases production costs.
Phil, I mean, won't it just lead to higher prices at the pump, what we were just talking about? I mean, if you cut their tax break, if you make their cost based higher, they're just going to pass that cost on to the people that are buying their products. That's what we saw happen with the banks. It would be the same thing with the oil companies, no matter how you feel about whether or not they should have these tax breaks.
I think that's right.
Phil, what do you think? I'm sorry, David.
I don't buy this at all. Are we going to have a free market here or not? This is a very profitable business. George W. Bush said in 2005, hey, you know, maybe we don't need all these tax breaks when oil's at $50 a barrel. It's now twice that. A lot of these breaks, I mean, we're subsidizing the industries of yesterday and undercutting the industries of tomorrow.
Well, yeah, you hate oil. Let's face it, you hate oil. That's what the liberal left does. But I want to raise your point. I want to challenge you. Yes, the oil's making good money now because of prices. They are also paying a fortune in taxes. In fact, worldwide, Exxon, as Rex Tillerson testified this morning, they actually paid more in taxes than they made in profits. And those tax breaks you're talking about are given their capital recapture. They're just investment write-offs. Every other American manufacturing industry gets the same. So why don't you want to repeal it for all the other industries?
Well, I think that is exactly where this is going. I see this as the first shot in a bigger battle over corporate tax reform. And there's a lot of consensus on both left and right. Paul Ryan wants to get rid of all corporate tax breaks. The President's Budget Commission
said, in return for lower marginal tax rates. I don't hear you. In other words, let's take the corporate tax down to 20 or 25%. Well, you're not suggesting that. Chuck Schumer's not suggesting that. All you want to do is penalize the oil companies.
Larry, I would suggest that. I think that we should have lower rates and get rid of all those loopholes.
Then I agree with you. Then I agree with that.
This is what President Reagan did in 1986.
Yes.
Got rid of all the loopholes, raised the rates, and brought in a third more revenue from corporate taxes.
That's good policy.
Okay, then we're in agreement here.
Phil, how much of this is just a political show trial and essentially it won't really yield anything that helps anybody out?
I tend to think that it is a lot of political show. We've heard this several times before. Nothing's ever happened. And while we're talking about this subject, something else to remember is that while these companies are making a lot of money, like you said, they are paying a lot of tax. And the tax rates paid by technology firms and healthcare firms and service companies are much, much less if you look at their effective tax rates. So they are paying more than their fair share as it is.
Phil, though, what about the argument that a lot of these incentives were created at a time when oil was $17 a barrel, and you needed an incentive out there to get them to go drill, and now you don't need that any longer? How do you counter that argument?
Well, the one thing that I heard Marvin Odom from Shell say, which might be kind of a compromise here, is that you could maybe index some of these breaks to oil prices. In other words, when oil prices go up, maybe you scale it back a little bit. But you have to be careful because there's businesses that compete with the oil company, too. We give ethanol big breaks, and that competes with oil. So don't we have to treat both those industries the same as well?
Yeah, but you know, David Callahan, let me come back to this other issue of pension funds, state pension funds. This is for government unions, right? Middle-class people. They own a third of the energy stocks. They are the biggest investors in the energy stocks, about 31%. So if you tax oil bigger and you don't tax the other and you don't lower their tax rates, for example, then you're damaging the retirement income of the middle-class government unions. Trillions, for heaven's sakes.
Let's just keep things in proportion here. These companies made $1 trillion in the last decade. We're talking about taking away $20 billion in tax breaks over the next decade. This is a pinprick.
You're dodging my question. You're dodging my question. There are investor retirement benefits, huge ones. Oil companies are among the most widely owned stocks, particularly in the state government pension funds. I want you to address that, please.
Hey, if oil becomes less profitable, they'll move to something that's more profitable.
Oh, sure. It's easy as that, right? Just easy as that.
Okay, we've got to leave it there. Phil and David, thank you very much for joining us. A very quick programming note for you. We have an